Now comes the time to talk about the ovaries. The ovaries are one of the main organs in the female reproductive system, and they are responsible for the cycle of ovulation and menstruation in the woman. This is one of the two ovaries. We will take only one. And what we see here inside, it does not happen everything at the same time, but it is a sequence of events that are all shown in the same diagram to simplify the idea of what happens first here, and then when the time passes, this is what happens later. I will explain you now. So the follicle is a little structure inside the ovary that contains the oocyte. Okay, the oocyte is like the precursor cell of the ovum, and the oocyte matures. It gets bigger and more mature from the primordial follicle into the secondary follicle until it is mature. The follicle is this whole structure. The ovum, the one that gets fertilized, what we call in Spanish óvulo, is inside this follicle. This would be the first part. Then what happens at the moment of ovulation is that this mature follicle ruptures, it breaks, and releases the ovum outside the ovary into the fallopian tube. Okay, you see here that the ovum is released and this follicle remains inside the structure of the fallopian tube. Finally, what happens once the ovum has left the ovary and is now migrating into the fallopian tube to reach the sperm cell, what remains of the follicle is now called corpus luteum. Corpus luteum comes from yellow, and it is in fact a little yellow structure that we will see now in a few moments how very, very important it is to send the signals to the brain, especially to the pituitary gland, to get all the hormones to develop to prepare the body for pregnancy. Okay, this is the corpus luteum that then gets mature. This is the hormone secreting structure, and then it degenerates and disappears. 1 month after, the whole cycle begins again, but we'll see it now in the time. So what is very important for you to understand is that the ovulation and the menstruation, of course, because menstruation is a part of your ovulation cycle, is nothing but a chat, a crosstalk between your brain and your ovaries. We'll see now. Here you see the brain, and here on the posterior part of the brain, a very, very, very tiny part is the pituitary gland. The pituitary gland is called in Spanish hypophysis. What happens here every month over and over again in a woman's brain is that the hypothalamus, it's a inner part of the brain, secretes a hormone to the pituitary gland, and at a certain moment of the month the pituitary gland secretes two hormones, the FSH and LH. We'll see now what that means. FSH means follicle stimulating hormone. If you remember in the previous picture, we have been talking about the follicle, the mature follicle that holds the ovum. So this is a hormone that stimulates the maturation of the follicle inside the ovary. And then what we have also is the luteinizing hormone. Luteum, you remember corpus luteum, luteinizing hormone is responsible for the second phase after the ovulation. Here what we see is that when the hormones are secreted from the pituitary gland, how do they travel from the brain to our ovaries? So what happens? They go through the blood. So what we see here is the level of the hormones in the blood. And in the first phase, we have the follicle stimulating hormone. You see here what was drawn in the previous slide about the ovary. Here we see how the follicle grows and matures until the ovum is released in the moment of ovulation. That is in the middle of the cycle. We see here a lapse of time. Okay, this is time lapse. So The pituitary gland releases follicle-stimulating hormone that makes the follicle grow and mature, and then when it drops, the ovum is released. Why is it released? Because the pituitary gland now sends the luteinizing hormone. It peaks, this LH peaks. It gets very, very high levels, and then the ovum is released. Once the ovum is released from the ovary, the LH drops, and we have again, here we see the corpus luteum that is left. The corpus luteum, I told you in the previous slide, is very important because it sends also hormones. And these hormones, perhaps you have heard, is progesterone and estrogen, the pills that you take as a contraceptive method in order not to get pregnant, or the morning after pill. These are all pills that contain these hormones. What do these hormones do? They tell the body that you are ready to get pregnant. Okay? So what happens with these hormones that here you can see the estrogen and the progesterone, okay? The estrogen and the progesterone are high once the ovulation occurred. What do these hormones do? They go and tell the uterus, this is the uterus, okay? The ovary is here, the uterus is here. They tell the uterus that the chance that the baby might be coming is becoming high because you have released your ovum, you ovulated if you're a woman. So the chance that this ovum meets with a sperm cell is possible. So what happens? The uterus has to get prepared for receiving a baby. So what does a growing baby like? A little nice cradle, a bed, a soft tissue that holds the baby. What you see here in this last picture is a drawing on how the wall of the uterus, the inner wall, that is where the baby is implanted, gets thick and thick and thicker, prepared to hold the baby, to receive the baby. So in another presentation you will understand how the baby is implanted and how it grows. But for now you have to understand that, going back, after ovulation, what remains of this follicle that is now the corpus luteum gives the signal to the uterus to get prepared. Okay, ovulation occurred, let's get ready, the baby might be coming. Most of the times the baby is not coming because otherwise we would be carrying a baby each month we ovulate. That's impossible. So when the endometrium gets thick and thicker, endometrium is here the inner wall of the uterus, you see it here in this little picture, it gets prepared. If the baby is not coming, what happens? Boom, it drops. You lose. The uterus gets tired of waiting, the cycle is over, and menstruation occurs here. At day 28. At this point, the menstruation begins, and we are back on day 1. This can be considered, as a cycle. Once the menstruation begins, the endometrium menstruation is nothing more but tissue, uterine tissue, blood, and endothelial tissue that you lose because the baby didn't come and we don't need the uterus prepared anymore. And once you finished your menstruation, the whole cycle begins again with the ovulation, the preparation, menstruation. So this is how you now should understand the menstrual cycle. There are some very important issues for you to understand how your body works, to understand your body, and if you're a boy who is listening to this, to understand the body of your friends, of your female friends. If you have your menstruation that could last between 5 and 7 days normally, okay, the uterus lining, this means the inner wall breaks down because you're losing this endometrium that has been prepared for nothing. Then here you have the follicle, the FSH phase where the follicle matures, and here the ovulation occurs. The ovulation here is marked like many, many days. The ovulation is one moment. It's not all these days, all the time, like expelling ova outside the ovaries. you ovulate only one ovum each cycle, each month, one from one ovary 1 month, and another ovum different from the other ovary the following month. But normally we never know which exact day we are ovulating. If we have a 28-day cycle, the normally perfect book day would be on day 14, but it could happen before, it could happen after, but normally this is the fertile cycle. Once the ovulation occurred, the corpus luteum, this is why it's called the luteal phase, the uterus lining begins to thicken to get the baby, and if nothing happens, the endometrium just you just begin to lose it with the menstruation, because it's no use to have it prepared anymore for the baby. So when you take progesterone as a contraceptive pill, what you are interfering with is to to cheat the body, so the body thinks that you are pregnant, because progesterone is the hormone. We'll go back here. Progesterone is one of the main hormones that is secreted by the corpus luteum in case you get pregnant. So if you take progesterone, the menstruation will not happen, the ovulation will not happen again, because your body will be thinking all the time that you're pregnant, okay? So I hope this is a very complicated cycle with many hormones and many names, but it is important that you understand it. I hope you did, and if not, we have more resources. Thank you.